Once upon a time, there was a magical land called Azeroth, where happy MMORPG players would spend days on end leveling, laughing, and loving the world of Warcraft. That time is over, and the land is pretty much dead and barren. But we can't deny the fact that World of Warcraft shook the MMORPG genre and endured the test of time for many, many years. And it shouldn't be a surprise that many MMORPGs over the years try to get a slice of World of Warcraft's success by replicating the tried and true formula of gameplay that so many people had come to love. These games are called WoW clones, and boy do they range in quality. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to A Casual Analysis, a series where we analyze and discuss gaming trends old and new. In this video, we're going to be looking at the concept of WoW clones and reviewing a couple of them as they are today, 10 years after the peak of WoW's success. But to keep the intro short, let's start our discussion by defining what a WoW clone actually is. Back in the golden era of World of Warcraft, mainly the Wrath of the Lich King expansion, there was a large influx of new players into the MMORPG genre. World of Warcraft had brought the genre to the mainstream. There was a spotlight on this experience of sharing an entire world with your best friends, so much of a spotlight that even Mr. T, William Shatner, and Vern Troyer were telling you to try it out. So with all this success and new players coming into the market, you best believe that a whole mess of game developers want to cash in on some of that success. This is where WoW clones come into the picture. A WoW clone is not necessarily a picture-perfect recreation of the World of Warcraft game. Likewise, not every MMO that resembles World of Warcraft is a clone. A WoW clone is a game that uses the formula that World of Warcraft popularized and focuses on differentiating itself using one or two mechanics. For example, a developer may look at how WoW only allowed a character to be created with one class, and would try to think of a way to change that. So, he starts to create a game with dual class specialization. But now he has 300 other mechanics to build, not to mention creating an art style and graphics and music and be able to do this all well enough to attract enough players to fill the world that he's creating. Oh, and forking over a boatload of cash to fund the building of an MMORPG. If you spent millions of dollars on something, you would want to know that it would be successful. You would do everything in your power to make sure it worked and made you your money back. So of course you would use World of Warcraft as your template and work from there, right? Right. And lots of games did. Even Final Fantasy Online. I'm sure a lot of Final Fantasy fans are going to hate me for bringing their game up in the discussion of WoW clones, but the creator of Final Fantasy Online has very openly said that he and his team were heavily influenced by their love for World of Warcraft when developing their own MMORPG. But Final Fantasy put in a lot of work to differentiate themselves in the market. They created their own game and used WoW as an influence, not a rulebook. If you look at Final Fantasy Online and WoW today, you can see a lot of the same formula in both of the games, but there are plenty of differences to separate them, and over time, those differences happen to be the reason why so many people have taken up Final Fantasy and dropped World of Warcraft. For example, both games are quest and story driven, both have an emphasis on well put together theatrical dungeons and raids, both have an element of PvP even though neither of them have put a large amount of effort into them, and both push players to complete harder and harder content to chase better and better gear. However, WoW has taken the stance of only allowing one class per character, requiring you to level alts if you want to try another playstyle. Final Fantasy allows you to switch at any time on one character, allowing you to immerse yourself in one character rather than one class. Final Fantasy also chooses to tell the game's story through a much more focused lens, and has the heroes of the game interact with the player character. This allows the character to feel incredibly important and heroic while being part of a world with 3 million other players. World of Warcraft chooses to tell the story through a broader lens, which confuses the player in how they should feel about being called the hero of Azeroth and the Mawwalker when no one has addressed them by their actual name, even though we've saved the world like 9 times by now. And there are many more differences. But the interesting topic of WoW clones isn't about the few games that took off on their own, but rather the hundreds that failed to see any amount of time in the spotlight. The majority of these MMOs went one of two ways. Either they built a game using WoW's formula and failed to differentiate themselves enough, eventually succumbing to the weight of World of Warcraft's massive shadow, or they chose a way to differentiate themselves but could not provide the quality needed to entice players away from other games. And there are plenty of these MMOs, so let's take a look at two of the most popular WoW clones that have come out over the last decade and why they haven't succeeded like other MMORPGs have. Runes of Magic. Many players still have the nostalgia of playing this game in its golden era. It was praised for having a good design and differentiating itself just enough from WoW to be something special. Runes of Magic was probably the most popular WoW clone and is still alive today. For better or worse, it's not too hard to see the similarities to WoW. The game is set in a very similar fantasy world to that of World of Warcraft, with a structured quest and storytelling system, and features a progression system based on loot and player power. The biggest difference that Runes of Magic has is that one character can specialize in 3 different classes, meaning that there are different combinations you can choose depending on what situation or playstyle you're hoping to excel in. Runes of Magic is on Steam, and I tried to play it, but I was completely unable to, due to the amount of bugs and lag issues that I had starting from the minute I launched the game. I tried to fix it, but they don't really have tech support, so I decided it was just best to try again later. It should be no surprise to you that Runes of Magic is now owned and operated by Gameforge, a company well known for putting games on life support and milking their players using a predatory cash shop. So we will move on, even though I'm a bit bitter I didn't get to try it out, but if you want to see some gameplay, you may try looking at the Lazy Peon who did a first impressions video on it, or Josh Trife-Hayes who was pretty passionate about it back in the day. But for me, the inability to even start the game has killed my desire to play it, so we are moving on. I decided to do some research and found another WoW clone called Allods Online. Like Runes of Magic, Allods Online held a small amount of success back in 2010 and kept that amount until around 2015. Since then, a lot of the support for the game has been moved to another MMORPG that has come out called Skyforge, and Allods has kind of been pushed to the wayside. That's not to say the game doesn't receive updates. It is still a living game. It just has a very small player base, which means low income, which means minimal support. The game isn't bad. It has a cool, toony art style with a very Russian-centric theme throughout the game. This fits as the Allods team is based in Moscow, and the base gameplay is a lot like classic WoW. You pick a race and a class that is tied to one of 2 factions, and you are put into a tutorial starting area where you complete very basic quests to get acquainted with the game mechanics. The game is quest-driven with dungeons throughout your leveling experience, and the spells and combat are all tap targeting, global cooldown based. Other random WoW similarities are seen through the talent system that you feed into as you level, the layout and structure of the loot stats, and even the overall HUD. Quest texts are presented to you in the same way, the minimap in the top right hand corner looks identical to WoW's, and there is a dungeon and raid finder tool that allows you to join instance content from anywhere. I could keep going, but I think it's pretty clear from just watching the gameplay that there are plenty of mechanics and UI design elements that were based on World of Warcraft. Of course, there are some mechanics that are not in WoW, such as an auto-travel system to travel between quest objectives. I also really like the music so far. It's much more in your face than the ambient sounds of World of Warcraft. Both are great in their own right. Overall, I can see where Allods Online could have been very fun back in the day when there were more players, and how it could have succeeded if the devs didn't commit the biggest sins of free-to-play MMORPGs. As you watch more of the gameplay, I want to talk about 2 very important reasons that this WoW clone didn't succeed long-term. Specifically because what Allods Online did was not uncommon for many WoW clones that tried to succeed but couldn't beat the giant for one reason or another. First, Allods Online has been plagued with predatory microtransactions and pay-to-win progression since the minute it launched in 2010. The game is free-to-play, so you would expect a cash shop, but it was widely criticized for its predatory monetization practices and was shamed multiple times into reducing prices and removing unnecessary game mechanics that would drive people to open a high-limit Allods Online credit card. Disregarding the fact that it used to have paid level boosts and predatory in-game currency buying, the game also used to feature an extremely penalizing death mechanic. When the game launched, players who died would receive a debuff that reduced all of their offensive stats by 25%. This would then stack if they died again, so players who died twice would have 50% reduced offensive stats, and so on. The debuff lasted for up to an hour, depending on the player's level at the time of death. So how did players get rid of this debuff so they could continue playing the game within the hour? They had to purchase an incense item from the in-game cash shop. This has since been removed, but the mentality behind that design is still there. The second reason that Allods Online did not stand the test of time is how passive all the gameplay has become and how easy it is for a new player to lose any sort of interest really fast. The game could be really good for max level players, but if new players are bored out of their mind within the first couple of hours of gameplay, you won't build your player base at all. This is prevalent in the auto-travel system or the lack of any difficulty in combat or questing. This is opinion, of course, but to me the world seems pretty empty and feels very rigid. The buildings are noticeably fake, and the organization of questing hubs within the starting location forces you to travel through these large, empty spaces and make you actually feel lonely playing the game. I'm not sure if maybe that was the feeling they were going for, but it kind of just makes the game feel a little empty. If anything, this drives players to use the boosting conveniences that the game offers, and pushes a player to really consider diving into the cash shop for the number of boosts that you can take advantage of. So best case scenario, it's a little unexciting. Worst case scenario, it's predatory microtransactions. This isn't a full review of the game, so keep in mind I don't mean to completely dissuade you from trying it out. As small MMORPGs go, this is probably one of the best I've seen. It's polished to a certain extent, it's got plenty of personality to it, and I've read reviews that say in later levels you can have battleship wars, and a mount leveling system, and the game even has a marriage system in it. You can complete dungeons entirely by yourself with a mercenary contracting system that allows you to build a party of bots to play alongside you. And the biggest thing to note is that the main server is completely pay to win and almost completely barren for that reason. There is instead a subscription-based server which has just enough players to do content and seems to not have a lot of those pay to win features. It's just much harder to find since the Steam version puts you into the main free-to-play server, but if you're willing to pay $5 a month and spend some time leveling up, the game has a good cult following to keep it going. Just be very, very aware of what you're going into and keep your wallet safe at all times. To close out the video, I want to remind you that being a WoW clone isn't necessarily an indication of the game being good or not. Each game has a chance to succeed on its own, and won't automatically be worse than World of Warcraft just because it happens to resemble its gameplay. The MMORPG genre has a lot of stereotypes and expected game mechanics that most, if not all, games in the genre have in some sort of way. So if you find a game that is dubbed a WoW clone, don't dismiss it just because WoW is a bad game right now. Try it out, see if you like it. It may be your next favorite MMO. Thanks for watching. Remember to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content. But most importantly, I hope you enjoyed the video or at least found it interesting. That's all I truly care about. I hope you have fun trying out WoW clones or judging them from a distance, and I can't wait to see what we talk about next.